Bitcoiners. I hope you're all doing well this morning. I did something a little different today based on some feedback, and I jumped right in to the video. Morning, Rickster Swixter. I'm going to wait for some people to come around. Of course, that's the reason why I've always left this screen looking outside, but we're going to try it out. We're going to try and change it up here. We've had some people say maybe it looks like a mistake when you're publishing it. Because here's the weird thing. When I put it on YouTube after, if I edit out the blank space, it forces the video to go into another, it goes from live into video. You can't do it to a live video. And then I lose it in the live, and then I have the same video out there. And so that's why I don't do it. So we're going to try it this way. We're going to try just going straight live, no more looking out the window for a little bit. It was cool when I had the nice view, of course, at the farm. Maybe I'll bring it back for the farm. I guess that's the other thing. I kept it going when the view here isn't quite as cool as the view at the farm and all that. But that's life. Kevin, assalamu alaikum. Indeed. Enmity. Good morning. Good morning. I hope you're doing well. So I checked this morning, right? I took a picture of the sunrise. It came up as we would expect. And just before here, I can even confirm I didn't just check that Bitcoin's running. I made a little transaction. So it's definitely running. So all that's left for us to do is have a coffee and talk about what's new. It's a slightly fake sip that I did. I only had a little bit left in that cup, but I finished it. I usually waste the cup that I have here because it's, like not great by the end of the show. So today I tried something different again. It's a whole different day. Right? We're doing lots of different stuff today. But I'm glad you can make it. I'm glad everyone can make it. Indeed, Bitcoin is running hot. I noticed that. That's why I had a feeling it was going to continue today. So that's why we made a transaction to not get pinched by this stuff, right? We don't want to get pinched. And by that, I mean, I don't want to miss out. I tend to buy Bitcoin on Fridays just because it's a great day, right? And today's Friday, so I said, why not? And I would like a little bit of this pump in my life, so that's what we're doing today, right? So we got up early, we did it, and things are going real well, right? We're running along. Things are not going so well for people, though, who read fake news all the time because here's the thing. This is what I said for even the last time where this lab leak theory got confirmed by intelligence agencies and was put through the normal mainstream media. I said, wasn't that already confirmed? Like, how are we recycling news? Is the news just the same argument we had a month ago or 2 months ago or 5 months ago? I mean, I thought lab leak theory, when, as I said, this whole thing came out a few weeks ago, which we covered heavily on this show, I mentioned it then. I already thought it was decided, right? I already thought this was like confirmed, and everybody agreed. Lab leak was a scam. Oh, sorry, lab leak was real. The bat story was a scam, right? The bat story was a scam. I do have to pay attention to this one note from Bud because it is interesting. Before I continue with some Moscow time fake news, morning Bitcoiner just had a grandson born an hour ago. Bitcoiners are multiplying. Congratulations, Bud. Amazing news. Indeed, Bitcoiners are multiplying. We love to hear it. We love to hear it, Bud. Great news. So as like we've been saying, we didn't think this was even news the last time. They had Chris Wray from the FBI come out and say, "Oh, it wasn't a bat; it was a lab leak." We thought this was already confirmed and all that. So we were surprised when it became an issue again the other day. But it looks like they're not going to stop here, and we get this out of the Atlantic today. This is some pretty good stuff, right? So the Atlantic headline from today, the strongest evidence yet that an animal started the pandemic. A new analysis of genetic samples from China appears to link the pandemic's origin. Now it's raccoon dogs. Raccoon dogs. Not just dogs, because we don't want to blame them. That might be racist. It's raccoon dogs. It's raccoon dogs. Or speciesist, I guess you should say, like different types of dogs. It's not all dogs, it's just these one kind, right? It's the raccoon dogs. Um, and so this is starting to making the rounds today, right? This is another article. I don't see who shared it, but new data links pandemic's origins to raccoon dogs at Wuhan market. Genetic samples from the market were recently uploaded to an international database. Oh my God, an international database. Science at work, it proves it. And then removed after scientists asked China about them. Ooh, China, maybe hiding it. Maybe it's China now hiding it from the lab leak stuff. So Sagar and Getty, or Ngedi, I'm not sure how to pronounce his name perfectly. I am a fan, however. Wrote the following: the new natural origin propaganda from The Atlantic is literally laughable. Their source is literally a scientist who helped cover up lab leak in the first place. The so-called infected dog sample was collected after COVID already leaked from the Wuhan lab months earlier. I'll never understand why people are so intent on the theory that people willingly ate bat soup with a side of raw dog meat rather than leaked from an unsafe biolab in town. But hey, you do you. Give me a bat and a side of raccoon dog there. I'm gonna give me some bat and raccoon dog for lunch. No, it wasn't over there. It wasn't the lab. It says Wuhan Institute of COVID Virology or whatever it was called. No. It was the bat with a side of dog. Now, as we know, today is St. Patrick's Day. It's St. Patrick's Day today. So happy St. Patrick's Day to everybody. Now, the history of St. Patrick's Day is pretty interesting. So the thing about St. Patrick and Ireland, like Thailand or like Ethiopia, right? So Ethiopia is another case. These were two places that were never colonized. And by colonized, in the case of Ireland, I mean they were never colonized by the Romans at the time, because that was the context, right? So St. Patrick he was from England. He lived at the border of where Roman influence arrived in the 400 AD. So around the time of the fall of Rome, when they finally had to start retracting from England. Because Rome was getting sacked and they had all kinds of trouble back there. So St. Patrick actually comes from England at the time, right? It wasn't called England, it was part of the Roman Empire. And he was captured and ended up in Ireland, what was, the island of Ireland then, had a vision of Helios and Jesus and became a Christian from that moment. And, pardon me, I got something in my throat this morning. So, 400 AD, and what he's generally recognized for. So it's not just being the first Christian. It is the storyline, which is now consistent, right? There is no intermediary of Roman history and colonial history being lauded on top of it. There's other fake news around it and other disturbances in the narrative and those kinds of things. But what we know of St. Patrick is that there was the most notable thing about St. Patrick was there was an island for many years, which people thought was Ireland, right? But it wasn't. It was called St. Patrick's Purgatory. And it was a hole in the ground where they said St. Patrick had vanished this old race of people, this old religion that was in Ireland, and pushed them into a hole in the ground, which was purgatory. So it wasn't heaven and it wasn't hell, but it was a new place for them to be judged and considered. So the story turned into he vanished the island of snakes, but there's no record or any proof of snakes having existed ever in Ireland, at least since the Ice Age ended. So this is not an island that had snakes, but the story is he drove snakes out and he drove them into this hole. And then the other historical reading of it is that he pushed the people who were in charge of Ireland at the time, called the Druids, the Druidic faith. He pushed them into this hole, right? So we don't know exactly what happened. But the idea that he was someone who helped bring about enormous change to Ireland is well accepted, and he is sort of regarded as the father of the order that exists there, the social order, the religious order, and all of these things. And remember, just like Thailand, right, there's different interpretations of their own Buddhist faith because they were not part of the colonial empire that formed around them, which erased a lot of history, which changed the historical narrative, which changed their perception of themselves, right, in the neighboring countries. So Thailand is unique amongst its neighbors. Similar to Ethiopia, Ethiopia still has its own version of the Bible, which is not exactly the same as everyone else's. They have one particular book, which has the Book of Enoch, it's called, in the um, Ethiopian version of Christianity, which has a lot more information about giants and Nephilim and Atlantis and everything pre-flood, right? So it's a different interpretation altogether. Again, Ethiopia, like Ireland and like Thailand, no colonial power entered. Therefore, there was no historical rewriting. There was no reinterpretation of what happened. And therefore, it doesn't mean they're right or wrong or who knows. It just is a more contained vessel through which to view history without the disturbances that can come from historical rewriting. So, but what we do understand, though, is that the Druidic faith, maybe it was kicked out of Ireland, maybe all the snakes left Ireland, right? But we still have signs of the Druidic system in the modern world. The most important sign you can think of when you think of the Druidic world is the conductor's wand. So the Druids did not perform religious ceremonies the way St. Patrick did and the way the Irish Catholics did and the Irish Christians did. Their whole thing was these groups, and there was dancing and moving, and that's where the conductor's wand comes from, right? So a conductor wand comes from the Druidic faith. And that's the system they said St. Patrick drove out. So it was one, let's call it a propaganda system. Let's call it I sing, you dance system. And there are many people who believe that the system we currently live under displays many similarities to the Druidic faith. And one of the telltale signs is this word Hollywood. So the actual magician's wand that the Druids used was always made out of holly wood, right? So the wand is made of Hollywood, and we have a place called Hollywood, and it's this big narrative construction machine. It's the most important mimetic technology that's ever been invented until now, right? Until now that there's these new things coming. But it's all about narrative. It's all about pushing a point of view. And when they sing, you dance, right? That was the Druidic system. And that was the system St. Patrick fought. And when they say he drove out snakes, what they really mean is he drove out the people that would control you with a magic wand. So, what does that all mean for what's going on right now? Well, watching the banks, watching Janet Yellen on her communications tour, if you want to call it that, shows how much the world has changed and shows just how much the system is breaking down. And Turdemeester brought up a really good point of view, which relates this to Napoleon, actually. So we're going all through history here. And he says, every time the Fed goes to war, he calls that raising interest rates, and then admits defeat via monetary easing, more of the public's trust erodes away. Like Napoleon, you can only lose so many battles before people give up on you. Indeed, that's what happened to Napoleon in the end, right? He couldn't lose until he lost, and then he couldn't win, right? So he won a million wars. He did all these things. The Austrians and the Germans and all these people pounded the shit out of them, took control of all the countries, put his family into hereditary systems, right? He married into all these rich families. That's why his I guess, grandnephew or son, Napoleon III, became emperor and president, I think, of France 80 years later, or something like that, 60 or 70 years later. The late 1800s is when Napoleon III shows up. And Napoleon himself in the early 1800s was defeated. So he couldn't lose until he lost, and then lost and lost and lost, and that was the end of him. So when you don't have the confidence anymore, when people don't follow you the same way, it can go real quick. And so lots of people today laughing about what Janet Yellen was up to yesterday. So she had to go, because it's part of the job now. Like they got to get Yellen. Yellen in the fiat system, remember, as we've mentioned many times, the fiat system is made from words, right? Fiat are words, they're decrees. And you decree by fiat. So fiat is based on words. We've mentioned it many times. It's a marketing engine, right? We talk about the engines that drive different forms of money and the engines that drive different economic systems. Well, in this case, the system is words, and it is injecting words into brains, and then brains using those words to come to their own conclusions, and you have the world we live in. So she's there in Congress yesterday having to testify about all kinds of stuff. Now, again, I always laugh because, and I knew it would be significant when it happened in 2017. When Bitcoin sign guy held up the sign and she had that face, I said, this is too perfect. This is a work of art. I continue to believe that when we look back at the images, look back nostalgically in years from now, when we look back at this time as a fun time. I mean, I think we're going to remember this time fondly in our lives, despite the chaos and the craziness. And I think Bitcoin allows us to do that because, we've sort of already gone through personally the ordeal of figuring out what's going on and coming to terms with the lies and how much different we see the world versus before Bitcoin, and institutions and what we think of them and our role in them, right? So we've been through a lot of this psychologically already. So I think that's why we come together. I think that's why it's so fun to get together in the mornings and talk about the news, because I don't think I'm here really persuading anyone. I think we're just having a coffee and talking about what's happening because many of us are on the same level, in the sense that we see these institutions in a certain way, we see dollars in a certain way, and we see Bitcoin as a more sustainable engine to push us forward, a more perpetual machine, simply because it's easy to imagine a better future with Bitcoin, right? It is easy to imagine a better future with Bitcoin once you understand Bitcoin. So, when Bitcoin Sign Guy did that to Janet Yellen, it was significant, and I think everyone at the time knew it. And indeed, I think when we look back in history, just like there were famous images that boomers were always looking at in regards to World War II, and famous pictures, I really do believe it will be one of the most famous pictures from World War II. Her face and his face were just perfect. And when you see her now tasked with conjuring confidence in the system, and her and Biden, of course, we talk about it a lot, right? Biden just having to come and do that speech, can't take questions, can't open a door, the dementia shuffle. That's perfect the way it is. You don't even need to add anything to that. But Yellen going there and trying to debate this stuff, trying to argue it, is kind of funny. So here's one of her answers that I can't. I've been laughing about it all day. So Senator Marsha Blackburn from Tennessee comes out and says, "Do you really believe that we can spend our way to lower inflation, to debt reduction, into economic prosperity?" And Janet Yellen's actual answer, this is who they've tapped to save the system, all of it, right? This is the one who's got to conjure confidence. She says, "I believe that this lower promotes clean energy." What's her answer? Can you spend to get inflation, to lower inflation and debt reduction? And can we get rich by your money printing, right? I believe that this promotes clean energy. That's her answer. This is the mind we're dealing with. And Senator Blackburn, of course, says, that's not my question. But it goes on, right? A lot of people talking about how she met with Jamie Dimon yesterday. They cooked up a plan because she's got a debt ceiling limit. She can't just go and get this money out of the budget. She's got to get other people. So she got Jamie Dimon. They spent $30 billion depositing in another bank that's having a run, First Republic. So First Republic, confidence is waning. Instead of backstopping deposits, other banks like JP Morgan gave them $30 billion, and that should cover them for a little while anyway. But everything that she was saying yesterday, and there was another congressman from Oklahoma, I can't remember his name, But he had her on the ropes about a lot of this stuff, and it was all around the consolidation of banks in America. So he was saying to her, you know, you're only going to backstop banks that go through the process of determining whether or not they're significant enough, and whether or not, if you don't bail them out, there'll be a wider contagion. So I forget the name of the system. They've come up with this test. It's all made up. I mean, who cares, right? It was made up 2 days ago on a whim, and it's a stress test and blah blah blah. So she was trying to say, because you know it's a big concern that there'll be a consolidation of banks, and that there's now two tiers of U.S. banks, and that's what a lot of people have been talking about all week. The regional banks that aren't systemically important, are their deposits 100% insured by the federal government and the Treasury and the Federal Reserve? And he was trying to get her to say one way or the other. She just had to punt it. Oh, well, we'll do the test, and I can't answer if people are going to rush to big banks, and that's what's happened, right? Everyone is going to the big banks in America, and all these smaller banks are losing their deposit base. But that's how banks make money. They need deposit. It's called maturity transformation. That's what they go out and risk with, right? Your deposits in a bank are what they end up spending to make money themselves. Maturity transformation is the entire business line of a commercial bank in the Federal Reserve System. One of the memos I once wrote at Kraken was all about that, because we were sort of contemplating how we understand and how you make money, really, right, with a Bitcoin bank that is not allowed to give out loans and not allowed to perform maturity transformation. And I boiled it down to the simplest elemental units that I could. And this is what I came up with. I said, well, in the Federal Reserve System, what you end up having with commercial banks is their business model becomes maturity transformation, right? Not like, maturity transformation is what we individually are supposed to be doing, right? You have money, you find ways to invest it, and you have more money afterwards, right? That's what, more or less, what maturity transformation is. And whether it's interest, whether it's a fixed yield, or some of the risky stuff, right? That's a little bit apart from the idea of maturity transformation. But the idea of yield and the idea of investing in a bond or another instrument, because you're going to get more money by leaving it in a place for a certain amount of time, is more or less what the banks themselves do. Now they took that motivation away from the individual depositors, right? They kind of just want you on a subscription with a mortgage, right? That's all they could come up with as far as products. That's why everyone has the mortgage and are trying to perform a type of maturity transformation based on the valuation of houses, not the actual yield you get from the contract. So what I sort of came up with was the simplest way to make sense of it was investment banks, right, have other ways of making money. They can trade for you, they can invest for you, they can do work for you, and then make a bit of money off of that, right? Transaction fees or other things. But it's not just taking deposits and investing. So what ends up happening is that whole field of maturity transformation just transfers, and the bank takes over that business model, instead of the business model being, I want maturity transformation as a user, and then the bank helps me get to that point, right? Investment banks do something very similar to the way a private bank ought to work, but that's only available to high net worth individuals. They go out there and they do prime brokerage, and they do all kinds of things that will help you as an individual get rich. And my whole logic was that the frame you should take is a private bank, an investment bank, and think of yourself as an investment bank, but that your users are not as rich as the folks that are at JP Morgan, or sorry, at Goldman Sachs or anything else like that. So my idea was that maturity transformation and these other tools have been usurped by the banks, right, as a business model. And now we just think of it as that's the only way to do it, right? So everyone now sort of laughing at Janet Yellen, laughing at her testimony yesterday, laughing at her inability to answer the questions when it came to, are you destroying regional banks, and are you forcing people into the big banks? And she couldn't answer the question straight. She looks obviously befuddled. Like what was the funniest is that she arrived not even expecting that question. She didn't have an answer. If I was preparing her, if that was my job, and that was my job at one point to prepare politicians in one case, but to prepare people for these public scrutiny sessions and helping them get talking points together that would help defend them against whatever was coming. And she didn't even know people were going to ask her that question, and she acted like she didn't know people were going to ask her that question. So it was pretty funny to watch her flailing up there, and of course everyone picking up on this now. Here's Lynn Alden saying the Treasury Secretary is basically saying to hold deposit in big banks. They informally get better insurance for their depositors without paying up for it. And that's really what it comes down to. The big ones, because they pass her stress test, uh, can get this and others can't, right? And that's one of the things that she's going to have to defend against. But again, she arrived at the meeting as if no one was going to ask her that question, like it was a brand new question, right? Even though everyone has been talking about it for a long time. So if you continue to think about what she said in those terms and how funny she is, you're going to continue to get people laughing at her, at Jerome Powell, right? There was another one where Jerome Powell the other day had to answer why 2% interest, and he couldn't do it, right? Other countries do it. I don't know. It's just what we do, right? It's just what we do. I made a joke yesterday. I hosted Fed Watch with Ansel Linder, and I said specifically that. It's like, well, I don't know. Why do you paint your fence white? I don't know. People paint their fence white. That's what we do, right? That's just what people do, right? There was no logic, no coherence, super unpersuasive, of course, right? And now you get everyone sort of putting the dots together, right? Here's Eric Wall and Friedberg from the All In podcast, both of them coming up with the conclusion, of course, that the bank helped cause this crisis, right? We've been talking about it for a while. The idea that inflation was transitory was a trap. We knew it, right? Bitcoiners knew it. So no adjustment necessary for us. But not everyone was in on the joke, apparently, right? Especially the risk managers at banks. They weren't in on the joke. So Friedberg explained how the banking crisis is a second or third order consequence of the government's COVID lockdown policy. You can't shut down the global economy and stop trade and stop people and have the government step in to write a giant check and not expect that you are going to have to cash that check at some point. The way we initially tried to resolve the problem was to drop rates to zero and then spend our way back to a growing, supported economy, and then overshot, ended up with too much stimulus, too low rates for too long, responded too quickly, whiplashed back. At the end of the day, there was a giant gaping hole blown into the global economy when we shut down the world from COVID. And this is that psychological engine again, right? This is what I mean by the psychological engine. When you are like Ter mentioned about Napoleon, right? When you go to war and you have to admit defeat and you have to retrace, confidence is lost, and you only get so many times to do that. At a certain point, confidence breaks too much and you get a sputtering economic engine or a sputtering mindset. And the sputtering mindset of no confidence is now all based on the capacity of Janet Yellen and Joe Biden to be Hollywood wand bearers that help conjure confidence and support. These are the two, if you were to draft people on planet Earth, like, one thing I will say about Trump, when he was president, my timeline for hyper Bitcoinization was longer because he was good at it, because he's persuasive, because he was a conjurer, because he could instill confidence in enough people that he could perpetuate a successful US economy. He could leave America in stasis, is what I believed, right? He could keep America where it was. It might not recede, it might not change so much. I wasn't confident he was going to sustain it forever, but as long as he was there, he could keep the train on the rails, is what I thought. I could have been wrong. Who knows, right? He definitely created a lot of division and definitely antagonized a whole group of people. But his success was he could instill confidence in anyone. The feeling America had in itself and its economy was much greater at the time, even if he was scamming and lying, which he did regularly when he was conjuring, right? He would just project confidence, and even if it was there or not there, it was a thing. So watching these two, and that's why I said Joe Biden. That's why I accepted Joe Biden's victory the night of. I said, well, as a Bitcoiner, I got to be honest. Like, watch, knowing that we were headed into calamity because it was 2020. We could all tell the economic troubles were coming based on what the Fed had done for COVID and the lockdowns and all that stuff. I said, well, as a Bitcoiner, I would rather this guy and his band of buddies at the helm than Trump, because I want quicker hyper Bitcoinization. I want it to happen faster, and I want the psychological engine to stutter, right? And I don't want people to suffer, but I want to get rid of the malady. I want to get rid of the problem, and I want to administer the medicine. And if the patient is kept in such good condition because of conjuring, it'll be a little harder to administer the medicine that will make things better. So that was my frame at the time, and that's why I said, well, let's go with this. This is pretty good, right? Whatever happened with the election, I don't give a shit, right? Let's roll, let's rock and roll here and see what happens. And of course, things have played out much as we have predicted. Now, that's why I don't get angry at watching Janet Yellen sound so stupid. And I don't get angry at Joe Biden when he says ridiculous, stupid things and can't form a sentence. I don't get upset or shocked when I see that he's got dementia and is not really capable of playing a board game, let alone whatever's going on to keep this engine running, right? This is a complicated machine at this point, and complicated not because it's so sophisticated and amazing, complicated because you're piling lie on top of lie on top of lie. And once you pile lie on top of lie on top of lie, like Mark Twain said, right, it becomes very hard to remember all your lies, right? That's why telling the truth is the best plan, because you don't have to remember your lies, right? You can just go, it's easier, life's easier, the truth is easier to remember, and lying becomes harder. So what we end up having here is this, and even with this Hollywood machine, look at what happened with the Oscars this week. I made a joke the day, I didn't know they still made movies. I was surprised there was an Oscars even, right? So indeed, they do still make movies, by the way, in case you guys were wondering. They still are making movies. There's still movies coming out. Believe it or not, there are movies coming out. And but no one's watching them. And there was some people saying, "Oh, it was the biggest Oscars audience in 3 years, right? It's the biggest Oscar audience since COVID." Well, the numbers from just 5 years ago. Wait 1 second. Sorry, we had a lamp fall. The Oscars, 18 million people I think watched in total. I'd say a certain portion of them hate watched, hate watching, right? Like you watch something because you hate it. So a certain portion of them were hate watching. But the actual numbers from just 4 or 5 years ago, when the culture wasn't so divided and wasn't so polarized, were in the 40 to 50 millions, right? So it went up slightly, but we're still in a different realm altogether. The cultural relevance of the show is nowhere near what it was 10 years ago, 20 years ago. Nobody cares, right? So the ability of Hollywood to maintain these narratives quickly diminishing, right? Quickly diminishing. So, and then even put that into the context of what else is going on, right? Now we get this whole Reaper drone story that Reaper drones in the U.S. and MiGs, and you had General Miley up there, right? So you get Yellen, who's pathetic, and then Biden, and then you get this General Miley guy. He's got all the medals, never been to war. He's got like medals all over him here. And then you just see him trying to keep his lies in order like this, right? He's trying to give the interview. And then talking about thanking everyone for being, we had 80 people on the NATO call to talk about this Reaper drone and the MiG and what we're supposed to do. And oh my God, because of course America can't act like, oh, it was a drone that got shot down in a war zone and that's normal, right? And then they got to make it into this whole big thing where America can't stand having such an insult, right? It's an ego thing. It's all ego. And watching him on stage is as funny. It's as funny because, again, they are not sending us their best. I think Trump called him the stupidest man in government or something like that. Um, and indeed, he may be. I don't know much more about him, but so everyone talking about these Reaper drones and what's going on and what the trouble is. But here's what it comes down to. I had some numbers on it here. It is not the first Reaper drone that has been knocked down. Let me see where it is. I think I missed the thing. Anyway, there's been many of them during the Syrian war. Not the first time it's happened. So again, you get this conjuring, you get this idea that, oh well, uh, America's ego was bruised, and we gotta defend our honor, right? But no one buys it anymore. No one buys it. We're not going to participate in any meaningful way other than give money and weapons over to Ukraine. No one cares. No one wants to stop that, right? No, sorry, no one wants to perpetuate it. Most Americans, if it ever gets to what Zelensky said, we're going to have to send our own people. I think you're going to see the whole thing collapse, right? We're not sending anyone there. America has enough troubles on its own. We've got enough things falling apart that I think most people's priorities are just on how to feed themselves, how to get over this financial crisis, how to get over this banking crisis. It has nothing to do with whatever is going on and the billions of dollars they're spending on Ukraine. So again, you get the system that is having trouble perpetuating itself. We laugh at these people. Hollywood's lost its effectiveness. The mainstream media's lost its effectiveness. They're back on now it's a bat and a dog, right? It's a bat and a dog. The bat wasn't enough. It's a bat and a dog. So no one buys this shit, right? But if you contrast that, and this is important, right? If you contrast it, and well, I'll even do one more, right? There's one more, and this is what Glenn Greenwald was talking about last night. We're talking about all the new spy powers, right? So not only does Biden have to fight this, conjure support in a war in Ukraine, conjure support in the banking sector, he's got another one where he's trying to get the spying powers from the Bush Cheney years renewed so that you can have warrantless spying on Americans, right? So people talking about that, and what you end up seeing, and Glenn Greenwald says the Biden White House is battling to demand renewal of Bush Cheney warrantless spying powers. Amazingly, Dems are more supportive of a war on terror powers than they were when they were at least when there was at least a war on terror to justify them. So that's a big part of it. And then in the end, you're getting a lot of Americans who understand now. And I would say the main base of Republicans that supported this stuff, and you get even folks like Tucker Carlson himself who says, I regret everything I thought of during the war on terror. I regret everything I thought of during the Patriot Act and everything that happened after 9/11 and the Iraq War and all of those things. I think Tucker speaks for many people who were involved in conservative and Republican politics at the time, saying, we made a mistake. And here's Lafayette Lee saying, do you see how they turned the war on terror into a war on populism and domestic dissent? Of course they have to, right? Because if you sit around complaining about this and complaining about that, it ain't going to happen anymore. So you've got to reorder your villains. You've got to reorder your enemies. And that was done, right? We've been talking about how January 6th people have been treated like terrorists for a long time. I've been treated like a terrorist in Canada for opposing what the government was doing with the trucker thing, right? So normal people now, which is predicted in the sovereign individual, normal people will be treated like terrorists, will be called terrorists, will be have the entire weight of the state focused on them as the enemy, not other nation states, individuals, right? And that's where we're at. Now, bring it back, though, to St. Patrick and killing of the snakes and driving the snakes out of the land, right? So here's my little shamrock, my little clover, and in honor of St. Patrick's Day, of course. And I just want to mention how, and by the way, the shamrock being a main symbol that St. Patrick used all the time, the shamrock is actually part of the Trinity, right? So it's the Father, Son, Holy Ghost. Some people say feminine instead of Holy Ghost, depends on how strict you are with some Christian doctrine. But anyway, that's why St. Patrick is always seen with that icon. It is part of the Trinity, it's his version of the Trinity. And when I think of driving the snakes out, right, and the trinity of things that will help do it, they are all at play in El Salvador today. And I'm going to share a few things about El Salvador that you might not know that are more than fascinating, right? More than fascinating. So, the first, and this is the biggest by far, this is the biggest by far. The innovation, not only the financial innovation with the volcano bonds and making Bitcoin legal tender, right? That's all super important. And that's what is the dam. That's the middle. That's the engine. Just like the snake is the engine here that perpetuates this Bitcoin in the middle can perpetuate these things. And what this is here is the openness to new energy systems. Volcano bonds are one thing. What's going on with the volcano are another. I talk about small modular nuclear reactors around here a lot. Yeah, they're great, right? We talk about them all the time. They're amazing, right? But El Salvador has just done something different. And this is big news. This is not. This is maybe the biggest story in the world. It might be. It might actually be. You know, we often don't know. It's a human dysfunction. We can't. I can't. Many people can't tell the difference between good news and bad news. They look the same for a little while, right? They look the same for a little while, and even some things that are huge news, we don't even see it as that relevant. So this is just a little announcement, just something someone said in El Salvador, but is real and is happening. And it's the following. El Salvador has committed to rolling out thorium-based small nuclear energy in partnership with Energy Thorium. This is different than your normal small modular nuclear reactors. Thorium is a Gen 4 system. Very different. Very, very different. And I think even Gen 5 elements to it. I'm not quite sure. We're only really in Gen 3 that we're producing in America right now. These are the no meltdown. And a lot of the small modular nuclear reactors are not as advanced as this thorium one. Thorium is the new thing, the new fuel source. And he says, I cannot reiterate, this is from Gerson Martinez, I cannot reiterate strongly enough how massively bullish this is for El Salvador's future. More energy, more Bitcoin. Vamos por mayor El Salvador, he says. So El Salvador, not just doing the volcano thing, El Salvador jumping 2 feet first into thorium reactors, Gen 4 technology, and something that we're not even talking about at a level of importance in America. We're still worried about what's going on with fucking Reaper drones and all this kind of stuff, bank bailouts and all this ridiculous stuff, right? Now, of course, we've covered heavily on this show how they made fun of El Salvador, IMF. You're going to need a bailout, they said to El Salvador last summer. Well, who got the bailout, right? What system is having more trouble? Of course, we know. So the innovation is there. That's a big part of what's going on in El Salvador. But it's not just that, right? This aspect here, and it's not just give peace a chance. I'm not doing a John Lennon, like, oh my God, if we just imagine all the world, right? The El Salvadorians have been coming out of years of domestic civil war, gang violence, and trouble. They've had it up to here with that shit. Right? They're not going to Ukraine. They're not fighting a war against China. They're not doing any of those things. They've turned inwards to fix their own problems. They got rid of the gangs easily, I'll add. Now, were civil liberties were civil liberties trampled on when they got rid of it? Yeah. I mean, it's not perfect, right? But they got rid of the problem and have systems in place to help innocent people if they were improperly accused. But their main thing was, if you tattooed your face with MS-13, you're done. Like, we don't need proof. You're done. You're finished, right? And the appetite for peace there is greater than you'll find in most places because of the exhaustion, because of living with the knock-on effects of the war on drugs and the war on political dissidents in South America that American intelligence agencies, communication, propaganda have been waging for years, you end up getting this situation where they're done, right? They've checked out and moved on because there's nowhere to go. The engine had broken down. The engine had already broken down. The psychological engine of El Salvador was at its limits. There's only so much we can take. We can take a lot, right? We're unfortunately strangely adaptable to terrible circumstances, human beings. We can accept really shitty things and think it's normal. But what ends up happening here is once the people had had enough and there was a viable exit strategy presented by Bukele with Bitcoin, with his actions against the cartels, you end up getting a situation where they can have a conversation about a thorium reactor and new nuclear energy coming, and it fits with what's going on there. It fits with what's going on there. So it's a huge epicenter of change. It's a huge development about what's going on. And finally, that's just it, right? Not only does it promote strong energy and leverage the appetite for peace that El Salvadorians have, it's creating happy individuals, and that's all we want, right? This system here is not doing that anymore, right? There's some people, if you got bailed out, I'm sure you're happy for the day. If you were a person, if your business got bailed out, yay, maybe the system works for you, right? But the reason why America has so much dissonance inside of it, the reason why there is so much fighting and anger and stress is because these systems have broken. They don't perpetuate any happiness anymore. And in so many ways, a place like El Salvador, by getting things simple, by more or less separating the state with money, right, by making Bitcoin legal tender, you're abdicating a certain amount of control in the sense that you don't have the same tools in your toolbox that other nations have, right? You don't get to do monetary policy, but that's what we don't want, right? That's what people are sick of. It's the Napoleon thing that that Tur mentioned. The idea that people like Yellen and people like Jay Powell and all these others can actually calibrate a system. It's being sold to you as if it's like an F1 car, and all they need to do is get the engineering right, put in the right fuel, and you're going to be good. It's going to roll, right? It's not that at all. That's not a thing. It's not real. And the more and more trust that's eroded in this by watching them fail, you got to watch them fail, right? Watching Janet Yellen, sit like this and try and tell us about, I didn't say that about the banks. I didn't say the banks were going to consolidate. They just have to do the test. And if they're not part of the test, then they might fail. Right? Seeing that, or Joe Biden, the banks are sound, right? Seeing his dementia face and whatever they do to his skin to make it look that way, and the crazy smile, right? Whatever they do in these instances, the more you watch them fail, the more you'll understand that this whole thing is broken. And the more you watch a place like El Salvador do simple things and have success, right? All Bukele did was say, I don't want this tool. This tool leads me to trouble. I don't want it. I can't do it, right? Nobody can do it. It's not a thing. It is not a thing anymore. It's not a thing anymore. And the more you have people that accept that embrace that, the more healthy people you're actually going to create, and the more attractive El Salvador and other places are going to seem to Americans who are going to be giddy up and going pretty soon, right? So that's today's show. Happy St. Patrick's Day to everyone. Happy St. Patrick's Day. Let me see some of these comments. I missed all these comments. I wasn't moving through. Congratulations, buddy. A lot of congratulations, my man. We got another birth here. Enmity, I recently had twins. Bitcoiners are indeed. Congratulations, Enmity. Twins. Wow, I got twin nieces. Amazing. Feelings don't. Yeah, I'm so glad. I'm so glad that's starting to catch on. I mean, how does that? Just say the Ben Shapiro line, and you'll realize it's the stupidest thing going. Right? I don't know what conservatives were thinking. We're smarter than you, and our logic is going to work. Right? Facts don't give a shit. Our feelings don't give a shit about facts ever. Right? Hello, my name is. It's okay if you're late. I miss looking outside. Keep it. Yeah, maybe I will. I'll take feedback from everyone. I wish there was a way I could cut it out. I do. After the fact, I do like having it there. Maybe what I'll do is thanks for the feedback, though. That's the only nature I get. Sorry, AR. Um, he was on point. Yellen gave the same type of response that Powell gave the other day. Their answers direct attention away from the actual question. It's an extremely poor attempt at gaslighting at this point. Yeah, and that's what I mean. Watching them fail now is more valuable to Bitcoin than them just sitting in the background and doing this stuff, right? Watching them fail is important. Buenos dias, Bitcoiners. Buenos dias, Jose. The dry up regional banks and pave the way for CBDC plan. Yeah, it looks like that. Right, it looks like that. If you want to learn more about Book of Enoch, have a look at Reversing Hermon by Michael Hazard. Yeah, thanks. Hello, my name is. Yeah, I've looked at it a little bit. I like the. At this point, playing dumb seems like their only defense. These are dumb criminals. Absolutely, yeah, they are dumb criminals. Yeah, yeah. So much entropy. Morning, Dex. Late, but hello. Um, when is this Bitcoin conference in Toronto again? I'll look it up. I'll be there on the 20 something of April. Don't fear the Reaper. El Salvador is issuing travel. I know. I saw that. I love it. It's so good. It's so good. Just funny. I mean, we gotta enjoy the humor, guys. We have to. Like that's the way to win. Laughing at don't get angry at Janet Yellen and Joe Biden. He's a criminal. I know it sucks to have a criminal there, and it insults our idea of America. But that's what we got to do, guys. Right? My idea of America losing World War III looks like this. Right? That we're losing. Just Joe Biden being there is a loss, and I don't think we need to lose like a hot war. That's not. I don't want to see Americans dying. I don't want to see anyone dying. Right. I don't want to see dying people. I don't want to see any hot war. No dying people, please. No, thank you. But that's why I call this show the Breakup. It's those ideas of America that we need to break up with, and one of them is a criminal in the White House. Oh my God! Well, it's not. He's not the first. He's not the first, unfortunately. Uh, yeah, this is. I gotta worry. I mean, you see the color revolutions, and you see democracy fortification now in Hungary, and democracy fortification in Georgia near Russia. That ain't good, right? That ain't good. So, but I think El Salvador, yeah, is beyond. Yeah, that's my other point. Yeah, Joe says it would be glaring if they did. Yeah, I'm there now. I think we hit exit velocity. The old. Rocket science concept, right? Exit velocity. Once you hit that speed and you reach orbit, you're beyond earthly powers, right? The earthly power of gravity can't stop you anymore. So I think El Salvador has exit velocity. I think they're in space, and the earthly forces of the CIA cannot hurt them anymore. I think. I hope. I've always wondered about Hollywood pushing morality like money doesn't matter as they make millions. Yeah, the crossover here of Hollywood is apparent, and here the way it works with Hollywood movies and war is that they have the liaison, right? There's a liaison office at Secretary of State, and Secretary of State helps movies produce accurate depictions of the military. Even Tom Cruise has to go and kiss ass in order to get aircraft carriers for a movie like Top Gun to be made. And that and they have once that happens, once you say, "Oh, I need your help to make a movie," they get to look at your script, they get to look at this and that, and so they've had a fusing of this for a long time. I think there's even an interview years ago where I don't see half of these messages that you read out in the YouTube live chat. Really, yeah. And it is weird. The YouTube live chat will erase sometimes when I try and put it in. I don't quite get what's going on. So, um, so the yeah, I don't know what to do about some of these comments. So that's it. So um, the that office, the liaison thing, they'll redo your script and they won't help you unless you put the movie in the light that they want. So that's a system of control. There's no doubt about it. About how far do they get into the philosophical push of money? I don't know. I think it's all just this patriotism and good guys versus bad guys. Oh yeah, the story is Ben Affleck when he made that movie Argo, literally about CIA people making a movie in Iran to push political change. I think he's even made a joke before by accident saying, "Hey, you're going to find a lot of these kinds of people, more than you think." I think he made, how they do these publicity tours, and it was one of these, they'll sit down in a room and reporters will come in and ask them questions all day. There is one out there where he just probably had been answering questions for 7 or 8 hours, and he just gave like an honest answer by accident. It didn't make the final cut. It wasn't like a published interview, but someone has found it, and he's just like, yeah, got a lot of these guys. All right, team, I got a few things to do this morning. Thanks for coming. Like and subscribe. Do all the fun things that help the show grow. We're getting there pretty quick. And remember, when I get to the 1,000 subscribers on YouTube, the book's coming out. And we're real close now, over halfway. And I've been playing around with AI stuff a lot. I've been in like heavy, even my wife was like, I need something yesterday. I was like, I'm in a long conversation with the AI here. I can't, I'm doing something. And indeed, that's sometimes what it feels like. So I've been messing around with AI because my story's already. I personally wrote it, even though I'm getting AI to look at a few things. I personally wrote it from the point of view of an AI, starting in 2015. So, all right, team, happy St. Patrick's Day. Get your green on, and that's what it's going to come down to. Driving out snakes, guys. We're driving out the snakes. Thanks to Bukele and Bitcoin. Bye.